So this here is the Thrustmaster T128. It's a new haptic feedback racing wheel from the driving giants, officially licensed by Sony and said to be the perfect pick for driving enthusiasts looking to get into the driving peripheral game. I'd like to thank Thrustmaster for sending this unit along, but let's drift right into our review for the Thrustmaster T128. I've always liked the idea of buying a racing wheel for the various racing games that I have tried out over the years, but truth be told, the price has always been the thing that has put me off. Anyone that's ever looked into driving peripherals knows that it's an expensive hobby to get into. You could spend a small fortune on the various wheels and gears and handbrakes and pedals, and that's before you even get onto the really good stuff as well. Sadly, the Thrustmaster T128 doesn't quite buck that trend. It's still a relatively expensive product, but I was quite surprised with the amount of features that I got for that price. In the UK, the Thrustmaster T128 will set you back around £170, so it definitely is on the lower end of all of that. But what exactly are you getting for your money? Well, of course, to start, you'll get yourself a racing wheel with an easily adjustable clamp for desks and tables. To go along with that, we've also got a set of pedals for braking and acceleration. Now, on the wheel itself, you have 15 buttons and a D-pad, and some of these buttons cover the likes of your typical PlayStation squares and triangles. But I was also really surprised to see the likes of the share button and the home button there as well, meaning that it's all a really well implemented experience with the PlayStation. As an officially licensed PlayStation product, you can expect to try this thing out on the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5, but if you're driving further afield, it will also work on PC. Now, when you get your hands on the wheel itself, you might be overcome initially by the feeling that it's rather cheap. And that's because of its all plastic build. It doesn't look particularly expensive at first glance. But of course, actually driving this thing, feeling the weight of it and the heft of turning the wheel will quickly overcome any of those initial impressions that you had. Once this thing is in action, it in no way feels like a cheap product, whether that's because of the solid clamp that means it has a nice sturdy feel, or the fact that it has up to 900-degree turning angles, meaning that you can whip this thing around for those really tight corners. But the big feature, the reason that you should be buying this racing wheel, is the haptic feedback. Now, as PlayStation 5 players, we've become quite accustomed to haptics, and no, this isn't really on the same level of detail, but we are far beyond the days of a simple vibration in the wheel. I have been tearing up the tracks of Dirt 5 quite a lot with this thing, and the haptics meant that I could feel the type of road surface that was underneath my tyres, whether that be tarmac or a dirt trail. The haptics on display here are really impressive and really immersive, to the point that with my setup in the office here, I quite often forgot entirely where I was. But the detail in the vibrations isn't all that's coming to you with the haptics. This thing can also impart resistance in the turning of the wheel. While playing Dirt 5, quite often you'll get cars pushing the tail of your car out, and whenever this happened, I could physically feel the wheel working against me, and that goes for when I was drifting around corners or turning too quickly. I could feel the physics of the car through the wheel itself that just made it incredibly immersive. In those moments when you start to lose control and you're drifting from side to side just before the finish line, it makes it incredibly heartbreaking, but all the more engaging because you can physically feel that loss slipping out of your hands. Of course, it ties in really nicely with the physics of the game, but it was just so good with Dirt 5 that I genuinely don't think I could go back to playing with the controller after all of this. Of course, I'm talking a lot about Dirt 5 just because that's the game that I gravitated towards during my time with this. But honestly, there are a fair few experiences out there for you to try out. You've got Gran Turismo 7, you've got the Formula 1 games, the WRC games, Assetto Corsa, and even Farming Simulator 22. That being said, it's not an overly extensive list of games, especially if you're looking to play those that are optimized for the PlayStation 5, but that really is more down to the amount of upgraded PlayStation 4 titles onto PS5 that are available rather than the Thrustmaster itself. However, I would have loved to have seen more arcade racing titles like Hot Wheels Unleashed and hopefully the likes of the new Need for Speed. But let's get on to some of the pitfalls with this thing, because there are definitely some of them to be found. For one, the pedals, they don't feel cheap in any way, and they have a nice bounce to them when you're switching between the brake and the acceleration. However, if you're playing on a carpet like I have been, or playing in a room with a carpet like I have been, then these things will not stay in place. I was constantly having to pull them back with my feet because they were gradually sliding along the carpet, and eventually I had to wedge a cushion between my wall and the pedals, and it didn't really make for an optimum setup. Now, if you're playing on laminate flooring or hardwood flooring, this won't be the case. I did try it out in my living room with the laminate, and it stayed a lot more firmly in place. But for many of us that may have carpets in the rooms that we're trying it out, it is quite annoying. Additionally, and this is also tied to the pedals, is the wire that comes with it. So the other two cables I had running around the back of my desk to keep it a lot more a clean setup. I wanted the wires out of the way, but the pedal wire could never reach, it was nowhere near it, so it had to go down the front, which made it look a little messier. And not only that, it was catching on my legs quite a bit, and with the pedals sliding back, it was drawn tight quite a few times. I would have liked for a lot longer of a wire, but this could just be particular to my setup. Lastly, and this is potentially another nitpick of mine, the paddles are attached to the wheel, so as you turn it, they will turn with it. And when you're playing a really intense and twisty turny track, then you will often struggle to find which one's which. You'll be turning around a corner and needing to go down a few gears, but the gear to go down, the paddle to go down, is spun around 3 times, so you don't know exactly where it is, you can't find it, and I would lose a few positions quite often because of this. I would have loved to have had that separate to the wheel. I don't know how that would have worked design wise, but it's just something that kept coming into my mind anytime I had a really twisty turny race. However, I've got to say, I was overly impressed with this thing during my time with it. Now, I would have loved for it to be a little cheaper, but that seems to be the pill we all have to swallow when it comes to driving peripherals. Once you have this in front of you though, you have the wheel in your hands, tarmac under your tyres, you'll completely forget anything to do with price. I was so glad that this was my first ever racing wheel, because I don't think I could go back to controller after this. It impressed me that much. The T128 is a perfect pick for those looking to get into the driving peripheral game, and of course I do have the odd nitpick here or there, but overall I really couldn't recommend it enough. So those have been my thoughts on the Thrustmaster T128. Let me know down in the comments what your favourite racing game is to play with a racing wheel. It was Dirt 5 for me, as you can tell. I've been mentioning it a lot in this review. But anyway guys, thank you for watching this video. Remember to like it if you enjoy this kind of content, and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more. Anyway guys, I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.